You're listening to Crushing Classical, How to Thrive in Your Creative Career. I'm your host, Janet Ingle, oboist, entrepreneur, author, and business and creative coach for musicians. Today on the podcast, you'll hear my interview with Daisy Press, vocalist, interpreter, and creator of experimental classical and non-classical music. Her new album, You Are the Flower, music from Hildegard von Bingen, is out now, and hearing her talk about her journey to this project is so inspiring. I hope you enjoy this episode. Daisy Press was raised on the buses, planes, hotels, and stages of a large-scale international rock and roll tour on which both her parents performed for over 40 years. Since then, she has become a ferocious and ardent interpreter and creator of experimental classical and non-classical music in the United States and Europe. On her own over the last 20 years, Daisy has become a specialist in the music of 12th century mystic and polymath Hildegard of Bingen. Not a traditionalist, Press incorporates elements of North Indian Hindustani ragas into her unusual and extraordinary interpretations of the original medieval chants. I've been thinking a lot recently about the distinction between being good enough and being prepared enough and consistent enough to be a professional musician and being an artist. And it's come to me because in the last year, I've had a lot of drama going on in my family. A lot of health challenges have been happening, and it's been very busy. I've been running my business and doing my thing and starting this podcast. And creatively, I've been doing a lot of work. But on the actual oboe, I'd really been coasting for quite a while. Really since January. I don't think I went to a gig that I wasn't sight reading, and I'm not proud of that. And yet, I got away with it for the entire first half of this year. Nobody ever said anything. It was good enough. And for a while, I thought, okay, all right, this is fine. I can put all of my creative energy into writing and creative energy into offering the programs that I'm offering and into the new things that I'm building and creating. And for a creator, building new things feels really fun and exciting. But recently, I've really come back to the oboe and to playing it for enjoyment and to looking at how much more deeply I actually could study the music that I'm working on. What would it mean to be not just capable of playing the music, but actively excited about the music and with an idea in my head about how I want the solos to go, just like I used to be, right? Just like when it used to be hard to play the oboe and hard to show up for gigs and a little dangerous, like I might get called out for not being prepared enough. That it's interesting being at this point in my life where with the jobs that I have and the work that I have, it's pretty easy to be good enough to show up. And now that after 7 or 8 months of drama in my family, things really have settled down, and I do feel like I have energy again and time again and space again. I'm really excited to see what happens when I go to work with the intention of knocking their socks off, with the intention of really being not just okay, but terrific again. What does that look like? It feels like it's been so long I almost can't remember, and I'm super excited for this season to start up again and for me to care about my artistry again. I think in my conversation with Daisy, we really touched on some of these topics as well. The idea of burnout, the idea of being like exhausted with the work of being great all the time. She highlights a time in her life when she didn't want to sing and she took time off and did retail jobs and vet tech jobs and, made the money for living happen in a different way. And I love that what came out of that for her was such a renewed uh, quality and a renewed approach to her own artistry, which has now sort of come full circle and come out in this amazing album that she's released. And I guess I wonder what that looks like for you. What is your relationship these days with consistency and being good enough versus really bringing the thunder, versus really bringing your whole artistry and really working at what you're doing? And I wonder what would change that relationship if you want it to change, both for me and for Daisy. I think I'm not putting words in her mouth, but certainly for me, um, having the space, in this case, the summer and the end of summer and the beginning of the school year for my child, but not for me, um, having just a little bit of white space in my life that I could use to figure out what I wanted to focus on has been magical. I talked about this in my book as well, right? When I fired all of my lovely middle school and high school students and graduated all my college students and quit a whole bunch of teaching, it made space in my life for me to dream about what I actually wanted to have happen. And I hope that that idea feels resonant for you, feels possible for you. I don't really have a call to action here, although if you hop over to my website, you could easily book a call and just like chat with me a little bit about what this idea is bringing up for you. You could email me through my website, janetengel.com. It's always a pleasure to me to hear from you and to talk about ideas exactly like this. What would it mean to you to have the space to really bring the artistry you want to bring? Let's go on with the interview. I know you will love hearing Daisy speak. If you spend more than a few minutes a month on billing and scheduling for your teaching studio, you might consider Fonz. It's an all-in-one platform to help service-based businesses, like music teachers. In fact, it was originally created by a music teacher to manage their clients and their billing without stress and hassle. It helps you to up-level your presence and show up to your clients and students as the professional you are. You can get a free 2-week trial with the link in the show notes. Daisy Press, welcome to Crushing Classical.
Thank you so much, Janet. Lovely to be here. I'm ready to crush it. What does that mean?
um, that is a great question. The podcast was named before I took it over, but
Uh-huh.
to me, it is definitely about feeling like you are crushing it in the classical music industry or with your classical music education. So many people in this industry, I have found, feel like they're just like always knocking at the door that the gatekeepers are guarding or trying so hard to fit in with the institutional norms
Mhm.
that the people who don't really stand out, and
Mhm.
the people who are forging their own paths and really creating the lives and the projects that are important to them, those are the people that I want to celebrate and that I want to talk to. So I'm so delighted to be talking with you today. I've been listening to the promo tracks that your publicist sent over for
Mhm.
your new album that is coming out, that will probably be out right before this episode airs. By the time this episode airs, people, I believe the album will be available.
Amazing.
And this I want to hear all about it. It's the thing that I've been hearing is so unique and so beautiful and so uncommon. And I love what you've done. I haven't heard anything really like it before, so I really want to talk to you about how you found your way to this exploration. And I kind of want to start with Hildegard von Bingen. How did you
Yeah.
find your way to Hildegard von Bingen?
Yes. So, I myself have had many different lives doing many different things. I didn't go straight through, I didn't always want to be a classical musician and go straight through conservatory, be on an operatic stage. It just wasn't for me. So Hildy first made herself known to me when I was doing part of an undergraduate degree at Oxford, and I was studying with this awesome nun there named Sister Benedicta Ward, and we were studying together the theology of ecstatic experiences, of unknowing, and of sex. And so we went through a lot of the mystics, especially taken by the female mystics in the early Christian church. And Hildy was right there as one of them. And I think I didn't listen to her music at first. I read her writings.
Mm-hmm.
I read a lot of her letters. I looked at a lot of her paintings, and I was particularly interested in the language of sensuality, and also how it related in her writings to the Song of Songs, which is, this song in the Bible that's very passionate, kind of hot, kind of lusty. It depends on how dirty you would like your mind to be, to kind of like reach into the allegories and see what they could possibly be referring to or not. But I was really interested in this sensual union. So Hildegard had a lot to say about the body, about the female body, about all bodies, but about sex. She wrote about the female orgasm, which is wild in her day, because she was also kind of a doctor as well. She was like a doctor she was an herbalist. She's like, you take this thing from my garden, you take this, it does this to the body and this, and she has all these crazy books about like these crystals will do things. I mean, she lived in a completely different world than we live in now. It's almost like she like lived on the moon or something. Like medieval times were just so like, we cannot understand anything that she did truly from our perspective and through our lenses. But she is a person that, it'd be very easy to read extremely feminist and forward-thinking things into her work. And if that makes anyone happy, I think that's really, really fantastic. And she's such an inspiration like that. But that could be a whole other thing about historical interpretation. Mainly, it's that she really rocked my world when I was in Oxford, and I wasn't singing really at that point. But I did sing. I mean, I wasn't singing like, okay, singing is what I do. It's the thing that I do. I could sing, and I'd played violin when I was a kid, and I really loved early music. And I remember being at the Oxford bookstore, and I picked up some scores, some Hildegard chant scores, but I never really got into them. They just kind of, I was just collecting a lot of like paper scores at the time. Who does that now? But so that's, that was my first experience of her. And I studied a lot of other female mystics of the time, but she just really stuck out as a wild character. Also too, because like at the time the Pope decided she was legit. It's like, there's this woman, she's spouting off a whole bunch of stuff. She's very feisty, and she has these visions that, and she was middle-aged by that time. She was in her 40s. But the Pope was like, yeah, this girl, I think this girl's really got it. I think she's legit. And so the people of her time who were in charge of the whole church listened to her. And she had an incredible amount of influence, and she had the ears of so many of the important people who were really literally running the Western world at that time.
This is mind-blowing.
Isn't it though?
This is mind-blowing. Imagine today's Pope. Imagine the leader of a major church calling upon a woman of a certain age who is writing on these like very feminist, very intense, very sensual topics.
Yeah.
And saying, yes, this is the thing to pay attention to. Imagine that.
Yeah, that still couldn't happen now.
No.
That's still like, the body is still way, 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 way too feared. And the female body is still way, way, way too feared. Like, we're just going through such a slow process of waking up from that, and like this is actually, what I like to bring into a lot of my experience and my own body's experience of Hildegard is this sensuality and this trust that if the body goes there, it's not wrong. It's not a bad thing. It's like it's putting a new authority in sensation, which she really was a Catholic. She was a Christian. She believed in original sin. She wasn't like really truly a feminist of her day. Like she had this way of like writing to all these men around her, like, oh, I am but a poor woman. I am but, she would make herself very small
Mm-hmm.
for saying some things that she thought other people around her may not want to hear.
That's very
And
relatable.
yeah, yeah. She knew how to play the game. Like she was very smart politically.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I don't know what was behind her saying, I'm going to write about the female orgasm. And she believed like Mary could be in the Trinity. And she wrote this incredibly, incredibly sensual music that's about all these women, which I'll be performing soon, and a lot of which is on this album. And it's so apparent, but I don't know how much like of a feminist herself she really was. I think she just loved creation. And the female body is such a miracle of creation, the things that it can do. And I think if you can go into an ecstatic of a state enough, like back in that day, it's like, okay, we'll just kind of, it'll be legit because we'll say that it's like the love between Christ and the church. Like this is like orgasmic passion is like between Christ and the church. Of course, it's
Of
about,
course it is.
and then like in that way, it can kind of survive.
Astounding. So you said something about like self-trust and believing that like if this
Yeah,
is what the body wants to do, it is not wrong. That if this is
yeah,
what feels right, it is not wrong. And I feel like again, this is so contemporary.
yeah.
Like I struggle with that.
Of course. Yeah, me too, all
Yeah.
day long. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah,
so relatable.
yeah. It's so relatable, and it's not even titillating. It's just real. It's just
Hmm.
like it's just having a body
Of
that can
course. Yeah.
do these things, that can feel these things, and it just goes to show how cut off it is, how normalized it is to be so cut off from that. And people, you see movements, people are catching on, like all of this somatic experiencing and trauma-based therapy that's like not in the mind. You don't solve it in your mind like Freud
Hmm.
posited. You
Right.
solve the thing like if you just get to the right idea, the right memory, then it'll unlock this whole thing. No, not necessarily. Maybe it's the other way around. You see what the body is actually doing and what it's actually feeling, and working backwards from there as a point of trust, which is I mean, that's radically radical.
It is. It is. Even today, and believing that your body is telling you the truth is something that's really hard for a lot of people, especially
Yeah,
women. Again, this
yeah.
this podcast is not meant to be a feminist treatise, but
No,
like we just
yeah,
jumped there, and I love it.
yeah. And I really don't consider it's hard. This comes up in a lot of conversations about Hildegard and why I love her. And it does come down to this very simply too, where it's like I didn't get into it from a feminist standpoint.
Hmm.
I don't even know what to say about it, but I don't consider myself like a card carrying feminist. I have a lot of ideas and a lot of feelings about a lot of things, but like
Sure.
um, but it always turns to feminism, and that's fine. I really started singing her stuff though, and I guess this is a great segue into like what brought me back to Hildegard, like what got those
Please.
scores out of the chest all these years later, a couple of decades later, was that I had been at that point. So just long story short, I went to Manhattan School of Music after doing a whole bunch of other stuff at like Sarah Lawrence and Oxford, and I was like, wait, I want to be a musician like mom and dad. And so I got into school there. Kind of, I just made my mind up. I was like, I want to go there and I want to be a singer, but I didn't want to go and like be on the operatic stage.
Hmm.
not interested in going into that pool of competition, mainly because I wasn't ready for it. So the way I found out I wanted to learn there was to work with as many composers, student composers, living composers as I could. So that was a different type of training. It was training as like more of a singer as chamber musician, as opposed to singer as operatic soloist. So,
So
and,
can I pause a moment because
huh?
already I feel like I hear these threads of like, no, I don't want to do what everybody else is
For sure.
doing.
Yep,
I'm
yep.
going to go into music. Like mom and dad, can you talk about that for just a second?
Yeah, sure. My mom and dad are pop musicians, and I was raised on a rock and roll tour with them.
Amazing.
So, so wanting to be in classical music was a way of even rebelling from that tour. It was Neil Diamond's tour, and they were on
Hmm.
that tour for 40 years. My mom was his backup singer, my dad was his bass player. And for not all the time, but a lot of the time, I was the only kid on that tour. And, just these I just try to like imagine this small person with these very large eyes and these ears that are hearing all of this Neil Diamond music and sort of experiencing what it is to be on a super, super large scale rock and roll tour as
Hmm.
reality. And so that shaped me in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, it was like very othering. Um, but it also, of course, I mean, I think this happens with so many kids of musicians or like whatever they're exposed to so early on. There's just this like sense of home in music. It's
Sure.
visceral. Again, it's like it's in
Sure.
the body. It's not in the mind.
Hmm.
It can be whatever, but it's like this is where my nervous system feels right. Anyway,
Right.
so yes, so in becoming a classical singer, I wanted to be other from them. I wanted to put myself in a different stream and with a different trajectory.
Sure. But like
But I went,
accountancy never occurred to you.
no, yeah. Well, funnily enough, I mean, no, accountancy never occurred to me. Although sometimes I was remarking to someone last year, I was doing my taxes and I was like, wow, I'm really in this beautiful flow state. I'm really enjoying this because well, I don't know why because, but maybe it was just like because it was so far away from like abstract anything. I was like, this is the most refreshing thing ever. I love it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. I hear so I think so many of us are so multi-passionate and like can find our flow state everywhere. So I'm sorry I keep going off on tangents, but it's because this
Great.
conversation is so delightful.
Oh, I'm so
Um,
glad. Well, for me too, and thank you. I please interrupt all you want. Uh, yeah, be feel free. I don't mind being interrupted at all. Anyway, so I went from Neil Diamond to second Viennese school.
mhm.
Uh, and, and
Yeah.
so in that school of music, I did all this experimental stuff. I worked with composers. I worked with people I knew who were writing these pieces, sometimes for me, and that felt really like family. It felt very
Sure.
like attached and great. And then
And may
after
I
I
ask, I'm sorry, may I ask, did you feel like you got any pushback from your teachers, from your professors, in moving in that direction?
No, the only thing was, in some ways, it was just trying to find a teacher who would work with my voice and not try to make my voice into something that was A, darker, B, that sounded more operatic, because that's just not where it wanted to go. And compared to like a pop voice, yes, my voice sounds very classical, but I was never taken by like I just didn't get it. I just didn't
Yeah.
get the operatic voice. It's like it's not something that was like in my bones. I know for some people it is so deeply emotional and very certain voices here and there, but like, oh, hi doggy. Uh, but if you put on like Emma Kirkby or like those kind of like very clean, fine voices that still have a directness, almost like in pop music, uh, that's how I wanted my voice to be. So I had to find a teacher who got that about me. And one of my missions too was like I want to sing these like I'm singing a pop song. When I'm performing this music on stage, like I want the English to be understood. I'm never gonna like make the English accent. I'm never gonna like do the whole like British English tongue rolling thing. Like I was like I have this is kind of who I am, but with a pop music consciousness.
Because again, that's in your blood a little bit. And also
Totally.
maybe it makes the communication with the audience so much more direct if they're not having to like look at super titles
Right.
as you
Yeah.
perform.
Right. Yeah. And it's just, I mean, it's, yeah, it kind of boils down to like what feels right for me and what feels authentic for me and what doesn't as much, just for me. But I know I'm still going in a direction with this. So I did new music for, a long time here in the
Hmm.
city, like, did all these gigs working with just different people. The music is so much of it was just so hard though. And I just got so tired of that.
Hmm.
And I got tired of music that was more intellectual. And I found myself, just singing in a lot of concerts uh, that I myself wouldn't want to go to and be a member of the
Yes.
audience. I'm just like, with stuff like Steve Reich, I will always be thrilled to like be in the audience or be on stage. Like that's just
Sure.
like the beauty's just there and immediate. But like, I don't really want to go to so this is me. I don't want to go to a classical music concert and be like, okay, I am going to work really hard tonight from the audience. That's just, I love audiences who do that, and that's beautiful. And they do that a lot more in Europe, but that just wasn't me. Anyway, so long
Hmm.
story short, I got super burnt out of being a new music singer here, and I kind of just stopped doing it for a few years. And I did other stuff. I like worked at various retail locations selling, computers, fancy shoes, clothing, and then was like, maybe I want to be a doctor, and or maybe I want to be a veterinarian. I don't know.
I'm laughing, but I love that you're not glossing over this part of the journey
But this is
because
really important.
it's important.
Yeah,
It's resonant for so
yeah,
many musicians and for so many people.
totally.
Like you come into the career, you come into the field with such passion, and then like you begin to see the dark underbelly, or you just begin to feel like maybe this isn't it.
Well, yeah, and also like living in a city like this, you see other people who've taken more conventional paths and they're buying apartments and they're getting married and they're having babies because they have maybe other lifestyles that help them afford that. Um, and and I really felt very less than. I'm like, wow, I've really just like screwed this up. And because I'm not, on the top of this or the top of this. I'm not even like, having marriage and kids and doing all that. Like, I don't even know what I'm doing. So maybe it's time to just start over. And I think I was like late 20s, early 30s by this point. So yeah, so I just kind of quit, and it's so great to quit sometimes. It's so great to like take that identity away. Like
Hmm.
uh I'm no longer a sing I no longer have to like talk my game up. I no longer have to like
Hmm.
worry what gigs are happening, or what gigs I'm gonna get or not get. So then I worked at an animal hospital for a few years, just as reception, vet tech. I
Hmm.
actually still work there like 4 hours a week to keep my connection with that community. And because I also have this little monster right here. I
Oh,
have my
little
own little dog.
monster.
Yes, he's a monster.
Podcast
Um,
listeners cannot see the cute doggy, but
I think
we can.
I know, but there's small canine monsters I think in both our vicinities.
Seems like that,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Um, so yeah, about 2015, I was working in the vet full time and had this leftover gig in Europe from like, my crazy singing days, and went over to Vienna and did this gig. And I hadn't really sung much for a couple of years, and I had to like relearn the score, which was crazy hard, but
Hmm.
it came right back. And I walked into rehearsal there and we started rehearsing, and it was just everything new. Like Vienna was new to me. I didn't really speak German that much. And but I was in rehearsal,
Hmm.
and I just had this immediate like, oh, this is what I meant to do. I meant to be in rehearsal. It wasn't even really about performing. It was about just like making music with people and feeling my own voice come out of my body and feeling what that did to my spirit, my soul, and my nervous system. And so um, coming back to New York after that gig, I was just on fire to rebuild, and I was on fire to teach voice, and I was on fire to create music that felt good to sing. Even like I love singing actually the hard stuff. I really, really do. But I just wanted a little bit of an easy listening experience.
Yeah, I love that you keep bringing it back to the body, which is
Yeah.
exactly where we started with Hildegard von
Totally.
Bingen,
Yeah.
and talking about how it felt to sing
Hmm.
and how it felt like home, and how the voice coming out of your body was the sensation that you had been missing.
Totally.
Like I just love that commonality that
Yeah.
we're hearing through
Well,
this.
I mean, do you sing?
I mean, no, I no, I teach the oboe, so therefore I sing a ton, but only Barrett etudes and only within a range of like a sixth, you know?
Ah, I mean, the oboe is a beautiful voice. I know you spend a lot of time reed making. Like you spend a
Oh,
lot of
sure.
time like making your vocal cords, making those.
Exactly that. Building them from scratch out externally.
I love that. That's beautiful. Do you find though, if you've had a couple of days where you haven't played too much, and you just sit down to play something, does it move something through you? Like, does your voice as an oboist move something? Like, you come up with a new solution for something, or you just feel a renewal of energy, or what's your experience like?
That's lovely. I would say that the oboe does not reward laziness. So if I am a few days, a few weeks, completely off from the instrument, it is not immediately gratifying to come back. But I will also say that if I am in reasonable shape and, playing a little bit every day, or at least making reeds every day and like doing my reed maker noodle at the table, so it's not such an unfamiliar thing, coming back from that kind of like busy work to actual music,
Mhm.
that gives me what you're talking about. That gives me the coming
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. I love double reed players. They're so great. They're so yeah. I love it. I love being around it. The oboe, that's one of my favorite sounds is the oboe. It's just there's nothing like it. Anyway, did you sing in choir when you were little?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so maybe you had that kind of experience too. It's just like the voices together, like things happens to the body, the oxytocin, the bonding hormone starts firing. You kind of fall in love with each other when you sing together.
Oh,
And
sure, enormously. And that happens instrumentally as well. In the
oh
orchestra, in
yeah,
chamber music, it's so personal, and also everyone is bringing their best self to that, right? Like interpersonally in conversation, things can go awry so easily, but when like good musicians get together and we're communicating wordlessly,
yeah.
there's something magical about that, and there's something lovely about how working with others can trigger me into a flow state, which I
Yeah.
feel like you've been talking about as well.
Yeah, piggyback it. Piggyback it, man. Like piggyback on the good vibes. That's kind
Uh-huh.
of what it's like with Hildegard's music. Anyway, I realize I still haven't sort of completed this one big narrative loop I set out on arriving back here where I had this gig in Vienna and I came home and I had relatively no gigs here, no students. But I don't think I've ever been more on fire about something in my life as I was during that time. And I'm always trying to get that back. And it's just, I just
Hmm.
have to like let that time be. But it had this incredible magic in it where I just knew who I was and I knew what I wanted to do. And I didn't have an audience for it, but I was just, it's funny. I'm in this room right now that's full of a lot of crystal bowls,
Hmm.
singing
I was
bowls, and
noticing
I have
those.
about
Hmm.
yeah, I have about 10 of them behind me, like in preparation for this concert and the catacombs. But at that point, I had one crystal singing
Hmm.
bowl, and I thought, how do I start singing? How do I start singing where I'm like creating the vibe to sing in? And what I'm alluding to is like singing with a drone, Indian music. I'd had
Mm.
quite a bit of training in Hindustani ragas, never as a raga singer. Oh my God, no, they start when they're like 3 years old and they're
Hmm.
total Indian music geniuses. But I'd had the experience with my teacher at the time, Michael Harrison. He was my raga teacher. His teacher, Terry Riley. So all those kind of intonation people. I had the
Hmm.
experience of singing with a drone, with a perfectly in tune drone, acoustically in a room. And I think it was on a major third, where I sang like that high, beautiful, shining third scale degree of a major
Hmm.
scale, and it was like my whole body started buzzing from that, and like there was the pleasure in it, and I like starting to hear all these invisible voices when you start to really sing in tune, and realizing, wow, yeah, singing in tune is its own spiritual landscape, or the attempt to sing in
Absolutely.
tune. Yeah,
Yes, of course.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I that was like almost like conjuring. It was my own Harry Potter, because it was like conjuring up these invisible forces. It was like magic. So I had that experience in my head
Hmm.
from having done some raga and being like, yeah, I love how I feel when I'm doing that. So when I came back to singing, I'm on fire to become a singer again, or whatever that means. I had this crystal bowl, and that was going to be my drone. And I realized very quickly, as soon as I started singing with it, was creating all these crazy beat patterns, and those were
Hmm.
invisible and exhilarating. And I just got the Hildegard out. I went through all my scores. I was like, what can I sing? What can I sing? And she was an obvious choice. And there's also some like Bernard of Ventador and all the like Renaissance medieval stuff in there. So I just started singing her stuff. And what I've always done when I have musical scores in front of me, like even if I'm learning, somebody else's piece, I write all over them in a lot of different colors. Like I have to color over it. I have to make it tangible. I have to draw all my
Hmm.
markings on it. In her music, I didn't have the very very old notation. I had modern notation of these very old chants. There were no rhythms and really no breath markings, no phrase markings. Nothing was really set in stone, because it's a translation from a translation from a translation from a translation.
And it's
And I
900 years old, so it's like that game of telephone. Amazing. Go on.
totally, yeah. And so I was like, I have no interest in doing this historically correctly. I just want to have a really good time with myself and with this. So I started drawing all over it. And there's actually some scores behind me on the walls too. You can't see them too well, but I just go in and I write all the rhythms. I say, like, if I don't like where a syllable is, I'll change it. It's like I'm putting this here, I'm breathing here. Okay, I'm going to make all these really fast. These are 16th notes. Okay, these are going to be like, like duples, and here's triplets here, and I'm going to hold this out. And so I become very authoritative in how I'm going to do it. And,
Yes.
and it's based on what feels right. And then singing that with a drone and starting to like be in conversation with the drone and the overtones of it
Sure.
as well. It's all pleasure based. I'm doing it wrong, but I'm doing it so right, just so right for me.
Because you keep using these words, like it feels this way. It feels I'm
Totally.
doing it this way because that's the way it feels good in my voice. That's the way it feels good in my body. That's the way it feels good with the harmonic overtone series.
Yeah.
Stunning, stunning. And like, here, can we put a pin in this point?
Hmm.
And can I ask how? I think right here is the point that a lot of people say, wow, I have a really creative project in me too, but no one will ever pay me to do it, or I don't have an opportunity to do it, or like if I don't have a tenured college teaching position with like a full funding, there's no way I'm ever going to get to do this. And like people ask themselves, like, who am I to create this kind of amazing project? And so I just have to ask, how do you like how do you trust that you are the person to do a project like this? Where did it come from, the gall to create this?
um, well, sitting down on my bedroom floor and singing Hildegard and saying, okay, it's going to be like this, I didn't have dreams of a grand project. I
Mm.
just wanted to sing again. I just wanted
Oh
to be a
yeah.
singer. That was my only project. I just wanted to be a musician. And I had never been hungry for that in that way before. And I
Gorgeous.
just, like, it wasn't necessarily about, I want to go make a lot of money doing this. I want to go make an album doing it. I was just like, I want to be hired. I want to be in rehearsal with people. I want
Mm.
to make art with people. I want to sing at my potential, which I still feel like I don't do yet. But I think if I would have had any grand plans beyond that, I would have just bitten all my nails off. Like I just like it wouldn't have been as fun. And I still had a bunch of friends who were out making music and in the music biz, but I realized I also didn't want to like end up in concert halls
Mm-hmm.
doing this. But I didn't know what that looked like
Mm-hmm. And
in a lot of ways. But here's another thing. Here's how I had the gall was I was ready to, and every once in a while I still do this, but and I started doing this then, but I was ready to go and just sing in Central Park. It's like I'm just gonna go busk for a while. And I
mm-hmm.
still had my job working at the vet. I didn't have students just yet, and I didn't know how that was going to start happening because I had to learn how to really teach voice. But I was like, I just go and sing. Like people give me a couple bucks, and I'll just go and like sing in the subway. I'll sing Hildegard in the subway with my Shruti box with my crystal bowl. It'll be good practice. So I think coming from I from like a touring family or like it feels like circus family, we're kind of scrappy in a way. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's very ridiculous for me to call the Neil Diamond tour in the 80s and 90s a scrappy thing because it certainly was the opposite of that. But this idea of like working musician
Mm-hmm.
is exciting. So I want to be I want to have, and that's how I was thinking now. Of course, everything always changes and grows into something else, and we
Well,
get used to things.
absolutely. And can I highlight that for our podcast listeners too, which is that like if you had imagined at that moment in your apartment that you were going to have this amazing album coming out and you were going to have a publicist for it and you were going to get to
Right.
perform it in all of these like very fancy venues that your bio talks about, um, that would have been really intimidating, would have been really scary. But what you had was the desire to just do this thing. And
Yeah,
for our listeners, also, I find I always find in my own life too that just taking action begets more action. Just
totally.
if you've got the project in your mind, like just start the project. And maybe you don't know where the project's going, just take the first step. Do the thing, sing in your house with the bowl
Yeah.
and and see where it goes because it could go someplace amazing.
It totally can. And that's what I had already experienced as well, like in the just even in my career as a more modern music singer, is you do one gig with these certain people that maybe pays nothing. And God, I mean, I'm not actually saying that doing gigs all the time that pay nothing is the best thing because I really like had
Because you
enough.
gotta get paid
Oh
also.
God. Yeah, for sure. But if you do, you can kind of do one thing and then that snowballs into another thing and that snowballs into another thing. I know that can be such a cliche, but it's really sort of how it works. And it's really how I then got into this other world where I sang Hildegard and still do for a while. And it's not on classical stages. It's not on
Mm-hmm.
classical stage. It's in New York City nightlife. It's in Bushwick nightlife. And having Hildegard is incorporated into a much different kind of show than
Mm-hmm.
something you'd pick up at Lincoln Center. And it's like doing a Hildegard act after a crazy burlesque act or after some like really amazing Cirque du Soleil stuff where your friends are flying around in the sky or
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I got hired at House of Yes to sing this type of music for them as as a type of creator. So how did I get the gall in a lot of ways? It was answered by that because it was so experimental and last minute frequently and
Mm-hmm.
so chaotic that there was nothing precious or sometimes even dignified about it.
Yes.
It was just
Mm-hmm.
funny and younger and music that has a different like you have different priorities and aesthetics too in a nightclub, many of which are not great for us, but a lot of which are just like just throw it on stage, just throw it like just really seriously get
Mm-hmm.
through, like improvise this. And
Mm-hmm.
that's something that they don't teach you at Manhattan School of Music to just go
No,
and like
absolutely not.
it's that's like not how we do it there. So it's
Right,
nice
and
to
it could
go ahead.
sure and this comes back also to your theme of just needing to relate to the audience and giving them something
Yeah.
that they can grasp. And I don't believe that you're singing in English in these
No,
songs,
no.
but um the thing that you're doing is not hard to listen to.
Right.
It's something that you honed and developed in front of audiences,
For
is
sure.
my understanding of this story.
For
And
sure. Yeah,
of
yes,
course
they
that
totally
comes
correct.
back to your of course that comes back to your earliest training and your earliest images of like this is what it is to perform in front of people and to like bring them something that they can like and relate to.
Yeah, I mean, Neil Diamond is in a lot of ways like the epitome of that, almost to the other end. Like so much of what he did on stage for so many years, like anybody can make fun of it because it's just so strongly what it is. Like the
Hmm.
sequin shirts and all the big masculine grunting and the schmaltz and the arms being thrown out. Such a showman. So, I mean, he was called the Jewish Elvis, but he believed in it so much and it connected to so many people.
Hmm.
It was his own thing. It was like he had
Sure.
created his own world, and a lot of people wanted to come and live in that. And
Absolutely. And like you're exactly right. It might be mockable from a certain perspective, but there's also like such integrity in
totally.
this is what I'm doing and this is who I am being on stage.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And House of Yes for a few years and in a lot of other places, they really they gave me a place where I could just go and really be very intimate with the audience around
Hmm.
me and
Hmm.
take and bring this very sacred music to a place where, yeah, there's going to be like people on their phone over there, there's going to be talking over there, there's going to be like blood or guts on the floor or something like that.
Yeah.
And then what is it like to completely change the vibe of a room, from a room
Yeah.
that's like really beautifully profane to something that is otherworldly. And it was amazing to feel audiences really coming with it, like they're really going to come with me. And if I was there a couple of months ago singing something, and I like it's like, I'm going to wind them up. I'm going to wind them up. So I started like singing higher and higher and higher notes, but they started like howling with me. They're all kind of drunk too.
Sure.
It's like a football game.
Hmm.
Or the immediacy of that, like everybody's doing it together. And I was like, that's dope. That's really special. That's a privilege to do that.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely that. It is a privilege to have that kind of space where you can trust the audience and you can trust yourself
Yeah.
to change the mood of the room in that way and to be safe and also to be dangerous.
Yeah. Well, oh yeah. I love that. I love how you bring safety into it. Yeah. What does it take for you to feel safe on stage?
I nearly always feel safe on stage
Mm.
because the oboe is hard, but there's a lot of the oboe is hard, but I am the boss of the oboe. I have a group program called the Invincible Oboist, and I talk about invincibility
Mm.
as like when you walk out on stage with the oboe, you're really a lion tamer. Like you have fed the lions and you have trained the lions, and you go in there with your chair and your whip, and almost for sure you're going to leave the cage alive.
Uh-huh.
And that is kind of what it is to go on the stage with an oboe. The oboe is out to get you all the time, right? If it's not the reed, it's the little tiny adjustment screws, or it's the cracking, or it's the keys. Like I had a student whose thumb rest just like fell off in the middle of an audition. Just fell off, just left. And and through all of that, you're managing the actual instrument and your actual job, and you are also making beauty through that. And it's overcoming that barrier of like this fussy piece of wood in your hands to actually connect to the audience and make the magic happen. And I feel pretty safe on stage all the time because like the worst thing that happens is I have a disastrous experience with an oboe and nothing bad will actually happen.
Right. Right. I frequently think about like, yeah, what's the absolute like worst case scenario? And I'm sure somebody's gone through it and they lived through it.
Hmm.
on
Almost
stage.
for sure you're going to leave the stage alive, almost for sure.
Almost for sure. But I love that in some ways it's like I was picking up on your relationship. It's like your relational attitude, your relational synergy with this oboe, with this lion. And it is such a wild instrument. In a way, it's like, it's a way you can focus on that and be in that. And then that frees up the audience to come to you and come like be a part of your world. You don't have to show them anything except for this relationship that you have with this magical creature, and it's this that's the show.
That is, and also the lion tamer is a showman
Uh-huh.
also. Like
Uh-huh.
it's his show. So the lions are doing the jumping around and like standing on each other's manes or whatever lions do, but he's the one who's running it and he's the one who takes the bow at the end.
Uh-huh.
So I go out on stage saying, "Okay, I am the music. The oboe is the tool that's going to get it out there, and I'm going to like manage that tool real hard all evening so that it gets there.
Uh-huh.
But it's me, I'm the music."
I love it. I love that relationality. In a lot of ways I feel the same thing. Like if I go out to sing something, I love having my drone instruments with me because I can start by playing them
Hmm.
and then move into their sphere with my voice. And then it's not just me singing, it's like the beats between myself and the drone that
Hmm.
becomes the actual voice. And that's
Yes.
what starts to put me into the trance, which makes me feel safe. I'm creating my own ripples around me.
Hmm.
And then people will come and join that.
I can't imagine how lovely and welcoming that must feel in the
Mm.
moment. No one ever just like spontaneously comes up and joins an oboist.
Maybe some I would. I love me some oboe. I love me some oboe. That's such a great sound. That's great. I love that. Yeah, but with a lot of my students too, it's like how I ask them all the time, like, how do we feel safe? How do we create fields around us? I love rehearsal way more than I love performance, even, but I do love performance, and I found this in singing the Hildegard music probably more than singing some really difficult new music on stage, although
Hmm.
that you can create that with that as well. Like you can create your own
Sure.
world with anything really. But really starting to feel like this is just another sort of seance, like something. There's this show that I'm getting ready for. It is, I do think of it sort of like a seance. It's like I have an induction. It's going to be in these catacombs, and I thinking about, yeah, like what are all the sounds I'm going to bring people into, because I'm not there with any instrumentalists or any tracks. I just have all these singing bowls and some shruti boxes, and like how am I going to carry that?
Yeah.
And it's about the relationship. Like it's about, if I just have something to sing with, if I just have this bowl to sing with and we get intimate with each other, then I know it's all going to be okay.
Mm. Mm. Gorgeous. Gorgeous. I could talk with you all day long, Daisy. This is such a pleasure.
Same
Such a
here.
pleasure. The album is called, and I'm looking at
Hmm.
it right now. It's called "You Are the Flower."
Yes, yes.
Where tell will you tell the people where they can find that and where they can find you and how they can like follow your amazingness?
Oh, thank you. So they can find that, gosh, they can find it on Spotify, Daisy Press You Are the Flower. It's on Amazon. My website is daisyvoice.com. Um, and my Instagram is Daisy Press. And I created this whole 24-page booklet for it where I took a lot of pictures of flowers and a lot of like I sort of interacted with a lot of Hildegard's paintings in a
Hmm.
goofy, irreverent way that made me really happy. But yeah, it was like this huge labor of love with the record company too. It's like we did
Sure, sure.
all the translations, like all the translations myself from like my Latin world. I was like, I'm just gonna sort of do everything I possibly can here, again in
Hmm.
the spirit of okay, I'm not a professional photographer. I'm not a Latin scholar, but I want my voice to be all over this thing
Yeah.
because it feels good. Just because it feels
Yes.
good. Yeah. You
Yep.
know? Yeah.
Bringing us full circle. It feels good. This project has been a labor of love for you, and I can tell.
Thank you. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for talking with me today.
Janet, thank you so much for these great questions and your beautiful listening. And it was a total pleasure for me too. It felt good. It felt good. Amazing.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure you subscribe on your app of choice and leave a review too. It really helps us. Don't forget to check out Fonz if your own teaching or service-based business needs better systems, and use the link in the show notes for our special offer. Our theme music is composed by Dream Vance. You can hear his newest album, Rama, on Spotify and Apple Music, and follow him there for more innovative synth music. You can find me at janetingle.com, which is also where you can pick up a copy of The Happiest Musician book, reach out to me with thoughts or questions about the podcast, or apply for a possibility session to explore your own portfolio career and your thriving musical life. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.